Touch it, and you die, Omega. The words slithered through the throne room like poison, and Alara's fingers trembled just inches from the hilt of the cursed blade. She could feel the malice radiating from the ancient weapon, black tendrils of smoke coiling around its obsidian surface like living shadows. But she couldn't pull away. Not now. Not when everything depended on her. "I said step back!" High Priestess Morvana's voice cracked like a whip, and Alara felt the familiar sting of magical compulsion trying to force her body into submission. After 23 years of being the lowest of the low, an Omega without a pack, without a family, without even a surname to call her own, that compulsion should have worked. It always had before. But today, with the screams of the dying still echoing through the palace walls, with the metallic scent of blood thick enough to choke on, something inside Alara had finally broken free. "The king is dying," Alara whispered, her green eyes fixed on the blade. Behind her, she could hear him, Alpha King Thorn Silvercrest, the most powerful wolf in 7 kingdoms, reduced to agonized gasps as the curse ate away at his life force. She'd been the one to find him collapsed in the garden, black veins spreading across his bare, muscular chest like cracks in marble. She'd been the one to carry him, impossibly, her Omega strength somehow sufficient to bear his weight, back to the throne room where the High Priestess and her coven had been attempting their useless rituals for hours. "He's dying because that blade exists," Morvana hissed, her silver robe sweeping across the floor as she moved to block Alara's path. "It is the source of the curse that has plagued his bloodline for 300 years. Every king who has tried to destroy it has only made his suffering worse. And you're nothing. An Omega, a servant who scrubs chamber pots and washes linens. What makes you think you can succeed where high priests and ancient sorcerers have failed?" Alara had asked herself the same question 1,000 times since the whisper had started in her mind. A voice, ancient and feminine, and somehow familiar, calling to her from the blade itself. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, and her hand moved closer. The black smoke curled toward her fingers like it recognized her. "But I have to try." "Thorn won't thank you for getting yourself killed," Morvana snapped. "He barely knows you exist." That wasn't quite true, though Alara had never corrected that assumption. 3 months ago, the Alpha King had passed her in the corridor, and their eyes had met for just a moment. His eyes, molten amber with flecks of gold that seemed to glow from within, had widened slightly, as if he'd seen something that surprised him. He'd stopped walking, opened his mouth like he was about to speak, and then his beta, a muscular wolf named Garrett with shoulders nearly as broad as the king's own impressive frame, had reminded him of a meeting with the War Council, and the moment had shattered. Thorn had walked away, but he'd glanced back twice. Alara had counted. Since then, he'd looked at her 14 more times. She'd counted every single one, hoarding them like precious gems, even though she knew it meant nothing. Alpha Kings didn't notice Omegas. Not really. They couldn't. The social divide was too vast, carved into the very magic that governed their world. A groan of pure agony ripped through the throne room, and Alara's heart clenched. She spun to see Thorn writhing on the raised dais where they'd laid him, his powerful body arching off the stone. His shirt had been cut away by the healers, revealing the devastating landscape of his torso, walls of solid muscle carved into his chest and abdomen, each ridge and plane defined with almost painful perfection. But those magnificent muscles were now marred by spreading black veins that pulsed with sickly light. His face, which had graced 1,000 paintings throughout the kingdom, all strong jawline and high cheekbones, and a mouth that managed to be both cruel and sensual at once, was twisted in anguish. Dark hair, usually artfully disheveled in that way that made Alara's fingers itch to touch it, was now plastered to his forehead with sweat. And his ears, the elegant pointed wolf ears that marked his true nature, were pressed flat against his skull in distress. "He's in his death throes," one of the healers said, her voice breaking. "The curse has reached his heart." Alara didn't remember making the decision. One moment she was standing 5 feet from the blade, and the next, her hand was closing around its hilt. The world exploded into light and agony. She heard Morvana screaming, heard the other servants crying out in shock. But those sounds were distant, muffled as if she were underwater. All she could feel was the blade, not cold metal, but pure, molten pain pouring into her body through her palm. It should have killed her instantly. She knew that. Everyone knew that. The cursed blade had taken the life of anyone foolish enough to touch it for 3 centuries. But Alara wasn't dying. She was burning, yes, every nerve ending in her body shrieking in protest, but she wasn't dying. The blade was showing her things, memories that weren't hers. A woman with Alara's green eyes, dressed in ancient robes, standing before a king who bore Thorn's face but wore a crown 3 centuries old. "You rejected me," the woman said, and Alara felt the words like they were being torn from her own throat. "You called me weak, unsuitable. You chose power over the bond the moon blessed us with." "I had no choice," the ancient king said, but his amber eyes, so like Thorn's, were filled with anguish. "The kingdom needs an alpha queen, a Luna who can fight beside me. You're an Omega. Our children would be yours," the woman screamed, and Alara felt her rage, her heartbreak, her devastating grief. "The moon doesn't make mistakes, Aldrich. She chose us for each other. But you let your council and your alphas and your pride convince you that I wasn't enough." Alara watched as the woman, her ancestor, she realized with shock, crafted the blade from her own sacrificed magic and broken heart. Watched as she cursed it with a spell that would plague Aldrich's bloodline forever. Every king would bear the scars of rejection. Every king would feel the pain of a severed mate bond, even if they never met their true mate. Every king would suffer as she had suffered. "Until," the woman whispered, driving the finished blade into the stone at Aldrich's feet, "an Omega comes who is brave enough to choose love over fear, strong enough to hold what has held only hatred. Only then will the curse break. Only then will the Silvercrest line be free." The vision shattered, and Alara found herself back in the throne room, still gripping the blade. But something had changed. The black smoke was gone. The obsidian surface was glowing now, white light pouring from it like captured starlight. "Impossible," Morvana breathed. Alara didn't answer. She was staring at Thorn, watching as the black veins on his magnificent chest began to recede. The curse marks that had covered his skin since birth. Faint silver scars that formed abstract patterns across his muscular shoulders and arms were glowing the same white as the blade. And then, as she watched, they began to fade. "What's happening?" Garrett demanded, his hand on his sword. "What did she do?" "I didn't do anything," Alara said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice was. "I just held it." The blade pulsed in her hand, warm now instead of painful, and then it began to crack. Fine lines appeared in the obsidian, light bleeding through them. Alara gasped and tried to hold on, but the cracks were spreading, the light growing brighter, more intense. "Let it go!" Morvana shouted, but Alara couldn't. She was frozen, transfixed, as the cursed blade that had terrorized the Silvercrest line for 300 years shattered in her hands. The explosion of light sent everyone in the throne room stumbling backward, arms raised to shield their eyes. Everyone except Alara, who stood at the center of the blast, untouched. The shards of the blade dissolved before they could hit the ground, transforming into white sparks that danced through the air like snow. And then Thorn was on his feet. Alara watched in awe as the Alpha King rose from what should have been his deathbed, his powerful body moving with fluid grace. The black veins were completely gone. The curse scars that had marked him since childhood had vanished, leaving only smooth, bronzed skin stretched over impossible muscles. He looked like a war god come to life, all broad shoulders and narrow waist and long legs that ate up the distance between them in 3 strides. His eyes were glowing, pure, molten gold now, lit from within by his wolf, and they were fixed on her. "You," he said, and his voice was rough, deeper than usual, vibrating with barely contained power. How did you... He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his bare chest, could smell his scent, pine and snow, and something wild that made her Omega instincts want to bare her throat in submission. But she didn't. She couldn't move at all. Thorn raised one hand, and Alara saw that his fingers had partially shifted, claws extended, and deadly. But his touch, when it came, was impossibly gentle. He cupped her face with one large hand, his clawed thumb brushing across her cheekbone, and Alara felt something inside her chest snap into place with an almost audible click. "Mate," Thorn breathed, his eyes widening in shock. "You're my... How did I not... Why didn't I... Your Majesty, don't touch her!" Morvana's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "We don't know what magic she used. She could be dangerous. She could be trying to..." Thorn's head snapped toward the High Priestess, and the snarl that ripped from his throat was pure alpha dominance, full of such power that every wolf in the room instantly dropped their gaze to the floor. His ears, which had been relaxed against his dark hair, were now pricked forward in aggression. His canines had extended, sharp and white and deadly. "Choose your next words very carefully, Priestess," Thorn growled, and even Morvana, powerful as she was, took a step back. "This Omega just saved my life. She did what your entire coven failed to do for the past 6 hours. And you dare to accuse her of..." He stopped abruptly, his glowing eyes going distant, and Alara realized he was feeling what she'd felt a moment ago. The mate bond snapping into place. 3 centuries ago, his ancestor had rejected an Omega, severing a mate bond that should have been sacred. The curse had been born from that rejection. And now... "It was you," Thorn said, his voice filled with wonder. He turned back to Alara, both hands coming up to frame her face now, his touch reverent despite the claws. "All this time, I kept seeing you in the palace, and something in me wanted to stop, wanted to talk to you, but I didn't understand why. I thought I was just..." He laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. "I thought I was losing my mind. An Alpha King doesn't notice an Omega servant. That's what I told myself. That's what everyone says." "Everyone is an idiot," Alara heard herself say, and then immediately wanted to die of embarrassment. "You didn't call the Alpha King an idiot. You didn't call anyone in his presence an idiot." What was wrong with her? But Thorn just laughed again, a genuine sound of delight that transformed his usually severe face into something devastating. "Apparently so," he agreed. His thumbs were stroking her cheeks now, gentle circles that sent shivers down her spine. "What's your name? I don't..." His expression darkened. "I don't even know your name." "Alara," she whispered. "Just Alara. I don't have a..." "Alara," he repeated like he was tasting it, savoring it. "Alara Silvercrest." The throne room went dead silent. "Your Majesty," Garrett said carefully, his beta instincts clearly screaming at him to intervene before his king did something irreversible. "Perhaps we should..." "Announce it," Thorn said, not taking his eyes off Alara. "Send runners to every corner of the kingdom. The curse is broken, and I've found my mate. My Luna. There will be a claiming ceremony within the week. She's an Omega." The protest came from one of the council members, an older alpha named Valerius, who had always looked at Alara like she was dirt on his shoe. "You can't make an Omega your Luna. The kingdom will..." Thorn's head turned with predatory slowness, and the temperature in the throne room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "The kingdom will celebrate," he said softly, dangerously. "Or the kingdom will learn what happens when you insult my mate." His eyes, still glowing that brilliant gold, narrowed. "Would you like to volunteer for that particular lesson, Valerius?" The older alpha went pale and immediately bowed his head. "No, Your Majesty. Forgive me." Get out, Thorn said. All of you, except... His gaze swept the room, landing on his beta. Garrett, you stay. Everyone else leave. Now! There was a scramble for the doors. Morvana looked like she wanted to protest, but one glance at Thorn's glowing eyes and partially shifted claws had her wisely choosing silence. Within 30 seconds, the throne room was empty, except for Thorn, Alara, and Garrett, who positioned himself discreetly near the far wall, his expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry, Thorn said quietly, his attention returning to Alara. This must be overwhelming. I should have... He stopped, his jaw clenching. I should have scented you as my mate the first time I saw you. The curse must have blocked it somehow, blocked my instincts. But that's no excuse. I walked past you dozens of times, and I let myself believe you were just a servant. I let myself believe the lie that Omegas are somehow less, somehow not worthy of... You looked at me, Alara interrupted. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. In the corridors. You looked at me 14 times. I counted. Something shifted in Thorn's expression. Surprise, followed by something that looked almost like relief. You counted, he said. I thought I was imagining the connection. I thought I was going mad, because I couldn't stop thinking about a servant whose name I didn't even know. His hands slid from her face down to her shoulders, his grip firm but careful. How long have you worked in the palace? 2 years, Alara said. Since the previous housekeeper, Mistress Gwen, found me half dead outside the city gates. I was traveling from the Northern Territories trying to find work. I'd been rejected by my birth pack. Pain flashed through Thorn's eyes. Rejected, he repeated, and she could hear the barely contained fury in his voice. They rejected you. Cast you out because you were an Omega. Alara nodded. It's not uncommon. Omegas are seen as burdens if they don't have a powerful alpha to... It's barbaric, Thorn snarled, his hands tightening slightly on her shoulders. And it's going to change. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care which alphas I have to bring to heal, but this treatment of Omegas ends, starting now. You're going to make a lot of enemies, Alara said quietly. Good, Thorn said. Let them come. He pulled her closer, until her hands naturally came to rest against his bare chest. His skin was fever-hot under her palms, and she could feel his heart racing. I've spent my entire life bearing the scars of my ancestors' mistake, feeling the pain of a rejection that happened 300 years before I was born. And you were brave enough to end it. You picked up a blade that should have killed you, and you broke a curse that was supposed to be unbreakable. His eyes searched her face, intense and almost desperate. Don't you see? You're not weak. You were never weak. You're the strongest person in this entire kingdom. Tears burned in Alara's eyes. No one had ever... She'd never heard. I need to ask you something, Thorn said, his voice dropping lower. And I need you to answer honestly. The mate bond. It's real. It's there. I can feel it like a living thing between us. But bonding ceremonies, claiming marks, those are choices. They should be choices. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything just because the moon decided we're mates. His jaw tightened. If you don't want this, if you want to walk away, I'll make sure you're provided for. A house, money, protection, whatever you need. No one will force you to. I counted 14 times, Alara repeated. Her hands slid up his chest, feeling the incredible definition of muscle there, the raw strength barely leashed beneath smooth skin. 14 times you looked at me, and every single time I felt like maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe someone finally saw me. She met his glowing amber eyes. I don't want to walk away. The sound Thorn made was somewhere between a growl and a groan. His arms went around her, pulling her flush against his muscular frame, and Alara gasped at the sensation. She could feel every ridge of his abdomen against her, could feel the powerful bands of muscle in his arms as they wrapped around her back. Alara, he breathed against her hair. My Alara. Your Majesty, Garrett said quietly from across the room. I apologize for interrupting, but the council is going to be in an uproar. We need to prepare for— Let them rage, Thorn said, but he loosened his hold slightly, enough to turn his head toward his beta. But you're right, there will be challenges, political maneuvering. Some of the old families will try to use this to undermine the throne. Then we deal with them, Garrett said calmly. The same way we've dealt with every threat to your rule. But Thorn, he hesitated. The ceremony needs to be public. Very public. You need to show the kingdom that this isn't some temporary fascination, that she's truly your Luna. Thorn's arms tightened around Alara again, possessive and protective. 3 days, he said. I want the ceremony in 3 days. Invite every alpha family in the kingdom. I want them all to watch when I claim her. Alara's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. 3 days. In 3 days, she would go from being a nameless Omega servant to Luna of the 7 kingdoms. It was impossible. It was insane. It was happening. There's something else, Garrett said, and his tone made Alara tense. The curse breaking. It's going to have effects beyond just healing you, Thorn. The cursed blade was a conduit for enormous magical energy. That energy has to go somewhere. The court sorcerers are saying there might be ripples. What kind of ripples? Thorn demanded. Unknown, Garrett admitted, but possibly dangerous. They're recommending that Alara be placed under guard until— She'll stay with me, Thorn said immediately. In my chambers. Under my protection. Heat flooded Alara's face. In his chambers. With him. Alone. Thorn must have felt her reaction, because he pulled back slightly to look down at her. If you're comfortable with that, he added quickly, I won't pressure you. There are guest chambers nearby, or I can have the servants prepare the Luna's suite, though it hasn't been used in generations and will need— Your chambers, Alara heard herself say. I'll stay in your chambers. The gold in Thorn's eyes flared bright. Alara! I'm not afraid of you, she said. It wasn't entirely true. She was terrified, but not of him. Of the situation, yes. Of the enormity of what was happening. Absolutely. But not of Thorn himself. When he touched her, when he looked at her with those glowing eyes, all she felt was safe. You should be, Thorn said quietly. At least a little. I'm an alpha king, Ilara. My wolf is powerful, aggressive, possessive. The mate bond is going to make those instincts even stronger. I'm going to want to— He stopped, his jaw clenching. I'll want to keep you close. Keep you safe. Keep everyone else away from you. It's going to be intense. Good, Alara said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I've been invisible my entire life. I don't want to be invisible anymore. Something like pride flashed through Thorn's expression. You won't be, he promised. I'll make sure the entire kingdom sees you, knows you, respects you. Your Majesty, Garrett said, a hint of amusement in his tone now. If you're quite finished making declarations, there are about 50 servants outside the doors who are absolutely losing their minds with curiosity. Should I tell them the Alpha King is currently courting the Omega who broke the curse? Or would you like to make the announcement yourself? Thorn laughed, the sound rich and warm. Let them wonder a bit longer. He looked down at Alara, his expression softening. But first, I need to— There's something I should have done the moment I realized what you were to me. He released her, and Alara immediately felt the loss of his warmth. But then Thorn was moving, his powerful body dropping gracefully to one knee in front of her, his head bowed in a gesture of absolute submission. Alara's breath caught. An Alpha King didn't kneel, not to anyone. It went against every instinct, every tradition, every rule of their society. Ilara, whose surname I don't know, but will soon be Silvercrest, Thorn said, his voice carrying clearly through the throne room. You saved my life today. You broke a curse that has plagued my bloodline for 300 years. You were brave when you should have been terrified, strong when you should have been weak. You are my mate, chosen by the moon herself, and His voice cracked slightly. I am not worthy of you. But if you'll have me, I swear on my life, on my crown, on everything I am, that I will spend every day proving that I can be." Tears were streaming down Alara's face now. She reached down, her hands trembling, and cupped Thorn's face the way he'd cupped hers earlier. His skin was rough with stubble, masculine and perfect beneath her palms. "Get up," she whispered. "Please, Thorn, get up." He rose fluidly, his eyes never leaving hers, and Alara had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. He was so tall, so powerfully built, all broad shoulders and muscular chest and arms that looked like they could break steel. His dark hair was messy now, falling across his forehead, and without thinking, Alara reached up to brush it back. Thorn's eyes fluttered closed at the touch, and he made a low sound of contentment. "No one touches me," he said quietly. "Not like this. Servants are too afraid. Nobles are too calculating, always wanting something. But you," he opened his eyes, "you touch me like I'm just Thorn." "You are just Thorn," Alara said, "to me." "I'm going to kiss you now," Thorn warned, his voice dropping to a growl. "If you don't want." Alara went up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, cutting off the warning. For a heartbeat, Thorn went completely still with shock. And then he was kissing her back, one hand sliding into her hair while the other arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet entirely. His mouth was demanding but not rough, possessive but not cruel. And Alara felt like she was burning from the inside out. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Thorn's eyes were glowing so brightly they cast shadows on his face, and his canines had extended fully, sharp points visible when he spoke. "Mine," he growled, his wolf very clearly at the surface now. "My mate, my Luna. Mine." "Yours," Alara agreed breathlessly. "And on that note," Garrett said dryly, "I'm going to go inform the council before they break down the doors. Try not to do anything too dramatic while I'm gone." Thorn didn't even look at his beta as Garrett left, closing the massive doors behind him. His attention was wholly focused on Alara, his hands still framing her face, his body pressed against hers. 3 days, he said. "And then you're mine before the moon, and every wolf in the kingdom. They'll all see you. All know that you're my Luna, my equal, my mate. No one will ever call you weak or invisible or unworthy again. I'll make sure of it." "Some of them are going to fight you on this," Alara said. "The old families, the traditionalists. They'll say an Omega can't be Luna." "Then they'll learn what happens when they challenge their king," Thorn said, a dangerous edge to his voice. His thumb traced her lower lip, the gesture somehow both tender and possessive. "I've been holding back for years, Alara. Playing politics, making compromises, trying to keep the peace. But for you?" His eyes flashed. "I'll go to war if I have to." "I don't want you to start a war for me," Alara protested. "Too bad," Thorn said, but he smiled as he said it, the expression transforming his severe features. "You're my mate, my Luna. You broke a 300-year-old curse by being brave enough to touch a blade that should have killed you. If you think I'm going to let anyone disrespect you, you're very wrong." He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and devastating. When he pulled back, Alara's knees were weak, and she was grateful for his arms supporting her. "Come on," Thorn said, his voice still rough with desire. "Let's get you out of this throne room before the entire palace decides to investigate what's taking so long." He scooped her into his arms effortlessly, cradling her against his bare chest, and Alara couldn't help but marvel at the strength in his body. She wasn't tiny. Omegas were typically smaller than alphas, but she was still a full-grown woman, yet Thorn lifted her like she weighed nothing. "I can walk," she protested half-heartedly. "I know," Thorn said, his arms tightening around her. "But I've waited my entire life for my mate, and now that I've found her, I'm not letting go. Even for the 30 seconds it would take to walk to my chambers." He carried her through the throne room doors, and Alara had a brief impression of shocked faces. Servants, nobles, guards, all frozen in various states of surprise. before Thorn was moving down the corridor with long, powerful strides. His wolf ears were still visible, pricked forward alertly, and his canines were still extended. He looked wild, primal, dangerous, and he was hers. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt right in a way Alara couldn't explain. Thorn's chambers were in the highest tower of the palace, accessible by a private staircase that he climbed without even breathing hard, despite carrying Alara's weight. The doors were massive things of carved oak and iron, guarded by two alphas who immediately bowed their heads when Thorn approached. "No one disturbs us," Thorn ordered. "Not the council, not the priests, not anyone unless the palace is literally burning down. Understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty," both guards said in unison. Thorn kicked the doors open and carried Alara inside, then kicked them shut again with the same casual display of strength. Alara had a brief impression of a masculine space: dark wood furniture, fur rugs, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and an absolutely massive bed, before Thorn was setting her gently on her feet. "These chambers are yours now, too," he said, his hand still resting on her waist. "Anything you want changed, any furniture you want moved, any colors you hate, just say the word. I want you to be comfortable here." Alara looked around, taking in the space. It was clearly a room designed for an Alpha King. Everything was oversized, built to accommodate Thorn's considerable height and frame. But it didn't feel cold or impersonal. There were books stacked on a desk by the window, papers scattered across a table like he'd been working late, a worn leather chair by the fireplace that looked well-loved. "It's perfect," she said honestly. Thorn let out a breath, like he'd been worried she would hate it. "Good. That's good." He ran a hand through his dark hair, and Alara realized that the devastatingly powerful Alpha King was nervous. I need a shirt. I've been walking around shirtless for—" He glanced at the window, where the sun was setting. "Hours. That's not very kingly of me." "I don't mind," Alara said, and then immediately felt her face heat. "I mean, not that I wasn't staring at—" Thorn's grin was pure male satisfaction. "You can stare all you want, Alara. In fact, I encourage it." He moved to a wardrobe and pulled out a shirt, but didn't put it on immediately. Instead, he turned back to her, his expression becoming serious. "We should talk about what happens next. About the ceremony. About your role as Luna. About—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "About what being my mate means." Alara's heart was racing again. "Okay." Thorn pulled the shirt on, and Alara tried not to feel disappointed as all those magnificent muscles disappeared beneath fabric. He gestured to the seating area by the fireplace, and they both sat. Alara on the couch, Thorn in the chair across from her, close enough to touch but giving her space. "The claiming ceremony," Thorn began, his voice carefully controlled. "It's going to be public. Very public. In front of the entire court and any Alpha families who choose to attend. The ceremony itself is intimate. I'll mark you. A bite, here." He gestured to the junction of his neck and shoulder. "It's how mates bond permanently. The mark will be visible, a scar in the shape of my canines, and it will tell every wolf in the kingdom that you're mine." "Does it hurt?" Alara asked quietly. "I'm told it does for a moment," Thorn said. "But then the mate bond fully activates, and it's supposed to be—" He stopped, his eyes darkening. "I'm told it's overwhelming. Pleasure, connection, the feeling of being complete. But Alara, if this is too fast, if you need more time—" "3 days," Alara interrupted. "You said 3 days, and I agreed. I'm not going to back out." "You can," Thorn insisted. "I'll wait as long as you need. Years, if that's what it takes." Alara leaned forward, her hands clasping together in her lap. "My whole life, I've been told I'm not enough. Not strong enough. Not worthy enough. Not important enough. I've been invisible." She met his glowing amber eyes. "You make me feel seen, Thorn. Like I matter. Like I'm exactly enough. I don't want to wait years for that feeling. I don't want to wait at all. Thorn's control cracked. He was off the chair and on his knees in front of her in a heartbeat, his hands gripping hers. You are enough, he said fiercely. You're everything. And I swear to you, Alara, I will never make you feel invisible. I will spend every day making sure you know how extraordinary you are. He pulled her hands to his mouth, pressing kisses to her knuckles, and Alara felt something in her chest expand, warm and bright and perfect. Tell me about the curse, she said softly. You said you've felt it your whole life. What was it like? Thorn's expression darkened. Like someone was missing, he said quietly. Like there was a hole in my chest that nothing could fill. The scars. He touched his shoulder, where the curse marks had been visible that morning. They ached constantly. A reminder that my bloodline was broken, that my ancestor had rejected his mate and doomed every king after him to feel that same rejection. He looked up at her. I didn't know if I even had a mate. Some of the scholars thought the curse might have severed my bond entirely, that I was doomed to rule alone. But I'm here, Alara said. But you're here, Thorn agreed, wonder in his voice. And you broke the curse. You held the blade, and it shattered. And I felt... He stopped, his throat working. I felt whole for the first time in my life, and then the mate bond snapped into place, and I realized that the hole in my chest was never because of the curse. It was because you weren't there yet. Tears burned in Alara's eyes again. Thorn. I know it's fast, he said. I know you barely know me, and I barely know you, and this is all happening so quickly that it's probably terrifying. But Alara... His hands tightened on hers. I'm going to court you. I'm going to learn everything about you. Your favorite foods, your favorite books, what makes you laugh, what makes you angry. I'm going to do this right, even if we only have 3 days before the ceremony. You deserve to be courted, to be wooed, to be treated like the precious gift you are. I've never been courted before, Alara admitted. Alphas don't usually... Then I'll be your first, Thorn said, a possessive growl entering his voice. You're only. Tell me something about yourself. Anything. Alara thought for a moment. I love books, she said. When I worked in the palace, I used to sneak into the library during my breaks. I'd find a corner where no one could see me, and I'd read for hours. Adventure stories, mostly. Tales of brave heroes and impossible quests. Thorn's smile was brilliant. You were living in my palace for 2 years, reading in my library, and I never knew. I walked past you 14 times, and I never thought to ask what you were reading, what you were thinking. His expression became pained. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see you sooner. You see me now, Alara said. That's what matters. I do, Thorn agreed. He rose gracefully to his feet and held out a hand. Come on, I want to show you something. Alara let him pull her up, and Thorn led her to the far wall of his chambers, where a door she hadn't noticed before was tucked between 2 bookcases. He opened it, revealing a narrow stone staircase spiraling upward. This leads to the highest point in the palace, Thorn explained as they climbed. A private balcony. I come up here when I need to think, when the weight of the crown gets to be too much. He glanced back at her. I've never brought anyone else here. The staircase opened onto a small balcony, open to the evening air, with a low stone wall and a breathtaking view of the kingdom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and Alara could see for miles. Forests and villages and the distant glitter of the river that wound through the valley. It's beautiful, she breathed. It is now, Thorn said quietly, and when Alara turned, she found him watching her instead of the view. I've stood here 1,000 times, looking out at my kingdom, and I always felt alone. But right now, with you here, he moved closer, until they were standing side by side at the wall, his hand coming to rest on the small of her back. It feels different, better. Alara leaned into his touch, letting herself absorb his warmth, his solid presence. Tell me something about you, she said. Something no one else knows. Thorn was quiet for a long moment. I'm afraid, he said finally, of failing, of not being good enough for the kingdom, for my people. I've been king since I was 17. My father died in battle, and I inherited the crown before I was ready. I've spent the last 14 years trying to prove I deserve it, trying to be strong enough, wise enough, powerful enough. But some nights, I lie awake wondering if I'm just pretending, if everyone can see through me. Alara reached up, turning his face toward her with gentle fingers. You saved your kingdom, she said firmly. I've heard the servants talking. You've brought peace to territories that have been at war for generations. You've reformed laws that protected the powerful and hurt the weak. You've made hard choices that other kings wouldn't have the courage to make. You're not pretending, Thorn. You're extraordinary. Thorn's eyes were suspiciously bright. How do you do that? He asked roughly. How do you say exactly what I need to hear? Because I see you, Alara said simply, the same way you see me. Thorn pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the sun set over his kingdom. Their kingdom now, Alara realized. In 3 days she would stand beside him as his Luna, his partner, his equal. I'm going to be terrible at this, Alara said quietly, the fear she'd been suppressing finally bubbling up. Being Luna. I don't know how to address the court, or manage servants, or deal with politics. I'm going to make mistakes, probably embarrass you. You could never embarrass me, Thorn interrupted. And you're not going to be alone in this. I'll help you, teach you everything you need to know. Garrett will help. He's a good beta, loyal and smart, and, he hesitated. My mother's sister, Aunt Lyris, lives in the West Wing. She was Luna before my mother, and she's been wanting to return to court for years. I never had a reason to invite her back, but now she could teach you, guide you, if you want. I want, Alara said immediately. The thought of having someone to help navigate the impossible situation she'd found herself in was overwhelmingly appealing. Good, Thorn said. I'll send for her first thing tomorrow. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, and Alara felt the gesture all the way down to her toes. You're going to be an incredible Luna, Alara. I already know it. They stood together on the balcony until the last rays of sunlight faded and stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Finally, Thorn stirred, his arms reluctantly loosening around her. You should eat something, he said. And rest. It's been an impossible day. As if on cue, Alara's stomach growled loudly and she felt her face heat with embarrassment. Thorn just laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Come on, he said, guiding her back down the stairs to his chambers. I'll have the kitchen send up dinner. What do you like? What are your favorite foods? I don't... Alara stopped, realizing she didn't actually know. As a servant, she'd eaten whatever was left over from the nobles' meals, whatever the kitchen staff hadn't wanted. She'd never had a choice. I've never really thought about it. Thorn's expression went very still. You've never thought about your favorite foods, he repeated, his voice carefully neutral in a way that told Alara he was furious. It's not... as a servant, you just eat what you're given, Alara said. It's not a big deal. It's a very big deal, Thorn said tightly. He moved to the door and yanked it open, startling one of the guards. You, go to the kitchens. Tell them to prepare a selection. Meat, fish, vegetables, fruit, bread, cheese, pastries, everything they have. I want enough food for 10 people sent to my chambers within the hour. Your Majesty, the guard began. Within the hour, Thorn repeated, his eyes flashing gold. Go! The guard went. Thorn closed the door and turned back to Alara, his expression softening when he saw her uncertain face. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have snapped at the guard. But Alara... He crossed the room to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You're my mate, my Luna. You deserve to have choices. You deserve to eat whatever you want, wear whatever you want, do whatever makes you happy. And if I have to order the entire kitchen sent up here so you can figure out what your favorite foods are, then that's what I'll do." "That seems excessive," Alara said, but she was smiling. "Get used to it," Thorn said. "I've been waiting 31 years for my mate. Now that I've found you, I'm going to spoil you absolutely rotten." True to his word, servants arrived 45 minutes later with enough food to feed a small army. They laid it all out on the massive table in Thorn's chambers: platters of roasted meat, grilled fish, steaming vegetables, fresh bread with butter, soft cheese, ripe fruit, and delicate pastries that looked almost too beautiful to eat. The servants kept glancing between Thorn and Alara with barely concealed curiosity, and Alara could practically see the gossip spreading through the palace. By morning, everyone would know that the Omega who broke the curse had spent the night in the Alpha King's chambers. "That will be all," Thorn said firmly, and the servants bowed and left, though not without a few more curious glances. "Sit," Thorn said, pulling out a chair for Alara. "Try everything. Tell me what you like." It felt decadent and strange and wonderful. Alara tried a bit of everything, and Thorn watched her with such intense focus that it should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it made her feel cherished, seen, important. "The fish," she said finally, "and the pastries. Those are—" She took another bite of a delicate cream-filled pastry and nearly moaned. "These are incredible." "Fish and pastries," Thorn said, and there was satisfaction in his voice, like he'd just won a great victory. "I'll make sure the kitchens know. You'll have them at every meal if you want." They ate together as darkness fell completely outside, and Thorn asked her questions about her childhood, her travels, her time in the palace. Alara found herself talking more than she ever had, sharing stories she'd never told anyone, and Thorn listened to every word like it was precious. Finally, when the food was mostly gone and Alara was struggling to keep her eyes open, Thorn rose from his chair. "You're exhausted," he said gently. "You should sleep." Alara glanced at the massive bed, then back at Thorn, and felt heat flood her face. If you want, I can sleep on the couch, or—" "You'll sleep in the bed," Thorn said firmly. "It's more than big enough for both of us, and He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I want you close, Alara. I want to know you're safe, that you're here. But I won't—" His eyes met hers. "I won't pressure you. Nothing happens that you don't want. I give you my word." "I trust you," Alara said, and realized it was true. Thorn's expression softened into something that looked almost like awe. He showed her to an adjoining bathing room where servants had already prepared a hot bath, left out soft towels, and a nightgown that looked like it had been hastily borrowed from someone's wardrobe. Alara bathed quickly, exhaustion making her movements clumsy, and changed into the nightgown. It was too large, clearly meant for someone taller, but it was soft and clean. When she emerged, she found that Thorn had changed as well, now wearing loose sleeping pants, but no shirt, his muscular torso on full display. He'd also had the servants light a fire in the fireplace, and the room was warm and comfortable. "Come on," he said, pulling back the covers on the bed. "Before you fall asleep, standing up." Alara climbed into the bed, and immediately understood why Thorn had said it was big enough for both of them. The thing was enormous, easily large enough for 4 people, with soft blankets and pillows that felt like clouds. Thorn slid in on the other side, maintaining a respectful distance, though Alara could feel the heat of his body even across the space. He reached out and extinguished the lamp on his bedside table with a touch of magic, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the flickering firelight. "Alara," Thorn said quietly into the darkness. "Yes?" "Thank you," he said. "For being brave, for touching the blade, for breaking the curse, for—" His voice roughened. "For giving me a chance." Alara rolled onto her side, facing where she knew he was in the darkness. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, "for making me feel like I matter." There was a rustle of movement, and then Thorn's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers lacing with hers. "Always," he promised. "For the rest of our lives, Alara, I will make sure you know how much you matter." Alara fell asleep holding his hand, feeling safer than she ever had in her life. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the realization that sometime during the night she'd migrated across the massive bed into Thorne's arms. She was pressed against his bare chest, her head tucked under his chin, one of his arms wrapped securely around her waist. He was still asleep, his breathing deep and even, and Alara took a moment to just look at him. In sleep, the Alpha King looked younger, less burdened. His face was relaxed, his dark hair messy across the pillow, and one of his wolf ears twitched slightly like he was dreaming. He was devastating, impossibly handsome, all sharp angles and masculine features, but there was something almost vulnerable about him like this. As if sensing her gaze, Thorne's eyes opened, immediately focusing on her with the clarity of a predator. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then a slow smile spread across Thorne's face, transforming it completely. "Good morning," he rumbled, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Alara managed. "I didn't mean to. I must have moved in my sleep." "Don't apologize," Thorne said. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her impossibly closer. "I woke up with my mate in my arms. This is the best morning of my life." Before Alara could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. "Your Majesty," Garrett's voice called. "I apologize for the early intrusion, but the council is demanding an audience. They're threatening to break down the doors if you don't—" "Let them try," Thorne growled, but he was already pulling away from Alara, rolling out of bed with predatory grace. "Give me 5 minutes." "You have 3, Garrett said. "They're already gathering in the throne room." Thorne cursed under his breath and began pulling on clothes. Leather pants, a shirt that stretched across his muscular shoulders, boots. He moved with efficient speed, and within 2 minutes he looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful and commanding. "Stay here," he told Alara, pausing by the bed to cup her face in one large hand. "Rest, eat something, explore the chambers. I'll deal with the council and be back as soon as I can." He pressed a quick, fierce kiss to her lips. "Don't leave these chambers without a guard. Promise me." "I promise," Alara said. Thorne kissed her again, slower this time, then forced himself to pull away. "I'll be back soon," he said, and then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thud. Alara lay in the massive bed for a few minutes, trying to process everything. Yesterday morning she'd been a servant. Yesterday afternoon she'd broken a 300-year-old curse. Yesterday evening she'd discovered she was mated to the Alpha King. It was insane. It was impossible. It was real. She got out of bed and explored Thorne's chambers more thoroughly in the daylight. The room was beautiful, masculine and strong, but with touches of comfort that spoke of a man who valued peace as much as power. The books on his desk were a mix of military strategy and poetry. The papers scattered across his work table were covered in his handwriting, notes about trade agreements and border disputes and agricultural reform. He cared, she realized, truly cared about his kingdom and his people. Alara was examining a painting on the wall, a stunning landscape of mountains and forests, when the door opened again. She spun, expecting Thorne, but instead found an older woman with silver hair and sharp amber eyes that looked remarkably like Thorne's. "So," the woman said, looking Alara up and down with frank assessment, "you're the Omega who's got my nephew completely besotted." "You must be Aunt Lyris," Alara said, trying not to feel intimidated. "Guilty," Lyris said. She closed the door behind her and moved into the room with the same predatory grace Thorne had. She was clearly an alpha, her power evident in every movement. "Thorne sent a runner for me at dawn, very insistent that I come immediately to help prepare you for your role as Luna." She tilted her head. "He's terrified he's going to overwhelm you. Convinced he's moving too fast and you're going to bolt." "I'm not going to bolt," Alara said. "Good," Lyris said. "Because that boy has been waiting his entire life for his mate. And if you break his heart, curse or no curse, I'll make you regret it." But she smiled as she said it, taking the edge off the threat. "Now, let's talk. We have 3 days to turn you from a servant into a Luna, and while I have no doubt you're capable of it, we have a lot of work to do." The next 3 days passed in a blur. Lyris was a demanding but patient teacher, drilling Alara on court protocol, noble families, political alliances, and the thousand small details that went into being Luna. Thorn was in and out, dealing with the council and making preparations for the claiming ceremony, but he always made time to check on Alara, to steal a few moments alone with her, to ask how she was doing. And every night she slept in his arms, feeling safer and more cherished than she'd ever thought possible. The morning of the ceremony, Alara woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. Thorn was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her. "Nervous?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," Alara admitted. Thorn's hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite the claws that had partially extended. "Me too," he said. "I've faced armies, Alara. I fought in wars, made life and death decisions, stared down threats that would have broken most wolves. But the thought of standing in front of the kingdom and claiming you as mine?" His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I've never been more terrified in my life." "Why?" Alara asked. "Because this matters," Thorn said simply. "You matter, more than anything. And if I mess this up, if I fail you—" Alara pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "You won't," she said firmly. "We're in this together, remember?" Thorn caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Together," he agreed. The ceremony was at sunset, giving Alara the entire day to prepare. Servants came and went, bringing food she couldn't eat, a dress that was more beautiful than anything she'd ever seen, white silk with silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. Lyris helped her bathe and dress, talking calmly the entire time, grounding her. "The ceremony itself is simple," Lyris explained as she arranged Alara's hair. "You'll stand before the court. Thorn will make his claim, a formal declaration that you're his mate. Then he'll mark you, and the bond will complete. After that, you'll be Luna in truth, bound to him before the moon and the kingdom." "What if I faint?" Alara asked. "Then Thorn will catch you, and the gossips will say it was romantic," Lyris said dryly. "Stop worrying. You're going to be magnificent." As the sun began to set, Garrett came to escort her to the throne room. Alara's hands were shaking as she walked through the palace corridors, past servants and nobles who stopped and stared, their shock evident. The Omega, the one who broke the curse, about to become their Luna. The throne room doors were massive and imposing, and Alara could hear the murmur of voices from inside, the entire court, gathered to witness the ceremony. Garrett squeezed her shoulder once, reassuring, and then the doors were opening. The throne room was packed with wolves, hundreds of them, nobles and alphas and their families, all dressed in their finest. They turned as one when Alara entered, and the weight of their stares was almost physical, but Alara only had eyes for Thorn. He stood at the far end of the room, on the raised dais where his throne sat, and he looked like a king out of legend. He wore formal black clothing that emphasized his powerful frame, his broad shoulders and narrow waist. His dark hair was styled back from his face, showing off the sharp angles of his features, and his eyes, those incredible amber eyes, were glowing as they locked onto her. Alara walked down the long aisle between the gathered wolves, her head held high despite her nerves. She could hear whispers, feel the judgment of the traditionalists, but she didn't look away from Thorn. He was watching her like she was the only person in the room, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. When she reached the dais, Thorn held out his hand, and Alara took it, letting him draw her up to stand beside him. His hand was warm and solid in hers, anchoring her. "People of the 7 kingdoms," Thorn said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent throne room. 3 days ago, a curse that has plagued the Silvercrest bloodline for 300 years was broken. The cursed blade, which has taken the lives of countless wolves, was destroyed by an act of courage and sacrifice. He looked down at Alara, his expression softening. This woman, Ilara, who served in this palace unseen and unrecognized, was brave enough to touch what should have killed her, strong enough to shatter what was supposed to be unbreakable. He turned back to the assembled court, and his eyes hardened. "Some of you have questioned whether an Omega can be Luna. whether she's worthy to stand beside me, to rule beside me. Let me make this absolutely clear." His voice dropped into an alpha command that had every wolf in the room instinctively dropping their gaze. "Ilara is my mate, chosen by the moon herself. She is brave, strong, and compassionate. She is everything a Luna should be. And if any of you dare to disrespect her, to question her place beside me, you will answer to me, personally." The threat hung in the air, and Ilara saw more than one noble pale. Thorn turned back to Ilara, his expression gentling again. "Ilara," he said quietly, for her ears only, "before I claim you before the kingdom, I need to ask one more time. Are you sure? Once I mark you, once the bond completes, there's no going back. We'll be tied together for life. If you have any doubts—" "I'm sure," Ilara interrupted. "Claim me, Thorn. Make me yours." Something blazing and possessive flared in Thorn's eyes. He pulled her closer, until they were pressed together, and Ilara could feel the thundering of his heart against her chest. "Mine," Thorn growled, loud enough for the entire court to hear. "My mate, my Luna, mine before the moon, and every witness gathered here." And then he was lowering his head, his mouth finding the junction of her neck and shoulder, and Ilara felt his canines extend, sharp points pressing against her skin. There was a moment of bright, sharp pain as he bit down, marking her, and then the bond exploded between them, bright and overwhelming and perfect. Ilara gasped, her hands clutching at Thorn's shoulders as sensation flooded through her. His emotions, his thoughts, his absolute devotion and fierce protection. She could feel his wolf, powerful and primal, recognizing her as mate, as Luna, as his. And underneath it all, she felt loved. Completely, utterly, devotedly loved. Thorn pulled back, and Ilara could see her blood on his lips, primitive and claiming. His eyes were glowing so brightly they were almost white, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Luna Ilara Silvercrest," he announced to the court. "My mate, your Luna. Anyone who wishes to challenge her claim, step forward now." Silence. No one moved. Thorn smiled, fierce and triumphant, and pulled Ilara into his arms. The court erupted into cheers and applause, though Ilara barely heard it. She was too focused on